Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly AgWeather update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. Well, June has certainly been a turnaround from what we saw back in April and May, and this map shows us from June 1st to June 14th the total precipitation ranks by climate district. We can see just how wet things have been, especially in parts of eastern North Carolina, where some of these areas are having a top 5 wettest starts to June on record. And just remember, these records go back 129 years. Now, before we get away from this particular graphic, notice how wet it has been in parts of the Mid-South as well. So this is hitting cotton fields pretty hard, rice and corn and soybeans along the lower and mid-Mississippi River Valley. But throughout a pretty broad section here of the Corn Belt, we have been very dry so far in June. And if the precipitation doesn't return here soon, we're going to start to see some of this drought stress really manifesting itself in yield loss for corn and soybeans grown into this particular area. I can show it to you another way just for that particular spot, and you can see here that much of this area, despite some scattered storms over the last 7 days or so, is still sitting very, very dry, and some places have missed out. Meanwhile, we're well over 1,000% of normal on precipitation here in the last 2 weeks. And right here along the coastal Carolinas, there are pockets that are 800 to 1,000% of normal on precipitation. And this rainfall has really come through with some locally heavy amounts. I would like just to show you the last 7 days of accumulated precipitation. Remember, when you look at my color bar, these colors represent the 6 to 10 inch range, and where you get into almost these whites, that's where it goes off the end of my color bar. So extremely wet as we watch this large cutoff low just slowly sit and spin its way here through the mid-Atlantic, and it is what has brought us those repeated chances of showers and storms. Something to take note of, some of the bigger storm clusters here last week that fell into parts of the Dakotas, so this is really specifically for you corn and soybean farmers. Locally, some very, very heavy rains. But the heat that's coming back into this area, combined with the very strong winds last week, actually pulled a lot of this moisture right back out of the soil, and that's very concerning throughout that area. Eastern Corn Belt getting much needed rains during this time period, though. From there, let's take a look at why this happened. I thought the meteorology of this would be great to look at. So we were struggling throughout the month of May. So May 1st through the 27th, large area of higher atmospheric pressure here just slowly pushed over toward the east. And remember, flow around a high pressure system, in other words, the winds are clockwise like this. So our problem is, as that high moved over, yes, it created subsidence or sinking motion in the atmosphere, clearing things out, not allowing the atmosphere to basically get rising motion and precipitation, but it brought our winds all from the wrong direction. Well, since then, that high pressure cell, it's actually off the side of my map, and we talked about this last week, and the flow came back around like this, feeding in the moisture, which is what we want. We want the Bermuda high over Bermuda. That's ideal. And then in the upper levels of the atmosphere, this is what happened from the 28th through the 11th. We saw that cutoff low. See, the white in here represents where there was near normal atmospheric heights and lower at time. So as the jet stream ran over the top of this, that cutoff low is what helped to bring in all that moisture. And look at what it did. Drought Monitor. Now, this was the one that was released on June 10th, but it only had data through June 8th, and so we've gotten more precipitation since then, and there's still more coming. But we were looking here at what our drought situation looked like, and what I'd like to show you is, let's go up here and do change maps, and over the last week, just that one upgrade here with new data through last Tuesday, we've already seen at least a 1-class improvement and probably much more. Because when I look at those soil moisture values, this is how things looked at 16 inches in depth back on May 27th. And here are the new data. So we can clearly see the huge rebound and, of course, the flooding that has resulted because of this, especially from some of those flooding rains this past weekend. But it has, in the near term, really eliminated our major drought risk at this point. So while it ended fast with a tremendous amount of rain, I'm thankful overall that we didn't continue down the path we were headed. So where are we going with this pattern? Well, let's just take a step up in the atmosphere today. This is on Monday. We're looking at the low-level wind field. There's a couple things I want you to be watching. The first is down here. There will be a weak tropical disturbance we're going to be talking about all week long, moving its way through the Gulf of Mexico. It will actually be timed up with a stalled out boundary that will eventually show up right here. It's not there just yet, but it will be. And then this wave is going to move toward the north and east and will partly help the chances for the scattered storms we're going to experience later on today. But let's talk about that Gulf system first. Right now, the National Hurricane Center has increased this to a 60% chance of cyclone development. That's where they're talking about this becoming a tropical depression. Now, that would be good to keep those wind speeds well below 39 miles an hour, but we're going to see eventually what happens to the moisture from this as it takes a while, but as it eventually moves over toward the mid-Atlantic. The system developing off the coast is not something we need to necessarily be worried about yet. But this is new this morning. We are going to keep an eye now coming off of the west coast of Africa. And we're now into hurricane season, and it's just time that we start paying attention to this very, very closely. So the European model is currently giving the probability of development of a tropical depression about 70%. And again, this isn't a situation where we're concerned about the winds. What we're concerned about here is the fact that the models are attempting to take what's left of this over the next 10 days, drawing that moisture farther to the north, pulling it through the lower Mississippi River Valley, and expanding it here to the mid-Atlantic and through the east. And at times we could get some pretty heavy rain out of this. So let's take a look now at what this means in terms of our near-term and long-term precipitation patterns. Because today, we come back to this, it's a scattered thunderstorm event. And it's really going to crank up late this afternoon and this evening. So there is a frontal boundary sliding through right in here around this low that's curling up here over this part of Ontario heading into the northeast. So we could see scattered storms once again moving through the area by this evening. But after that, and the second little front comes through tomorrow morning, we're kind of in the clear for really seeing much in the way of precipitation. Now, I just took you all the way out there to Wednesday midday, and you can see what's coming here out of eventually out of the Gulf, which we need to keep talking about. But from there, let's go to the upper levels and see this pattern. Now, last week, we had a pretty good indication of a large ridge developing right here over this section of like the Four Corner states. And here it is. But this is not blocked. Now, if you ask, what do I mean when the atmosphere gets blocked? A blocked atmosphere is one where there is much more north-south flow than west to east, and therefore the weather pattern tends to get stagnant, stuck, and doesn't change. That often happens when the jet stream takes on what we call an omega shape like that. So if you can just imagine the flow going across the United States like this, or you end up getting what's called a high over low setup where there's a high pressure system here and a low to the south of it and the flow comes out like that. Those are two very persistent patterns. But what we've got is this open wave that's going to move like this, and watch the changes we got from last week. So as I go through this through Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, did you notice it? Come out here, I just walked back to Tuesday. This jet stream trough cuts right through the ridge and shoves it farther to the south and increases those wind speeds. What do we get? A broader trough over the east, and you'll see the temperatures reflecting that in a few moments. But as you get out here toward Thursday and Friday, the main jet stream flow is there. Now, just a reminder, where the jet stream is, beneath it there is a temperature gradient. That's actually why the jet stream exists. It's a reflection of the near surface temperature pattern, and it's always fastest above where we have the strongest temperature gradient or a front at the surface. So there's going to be a front here. Now you can't see this because tropical systems are not jet stream driven, but there is the tropical system coming through here. So it's going to hit this frontal boundary and really increase our precipitation chances then going into next week. And notice what the atmosphere is planning to do here by next Tuesday. Develop a pretty sizable trough. The flow comes to the south of it, and that just means our week 1 versus our week 2 precipitation patterns are going to be quite different. Here's the case in point. You saw the chance for scattered storms later today, right? After that, we aren't seeing much. This goes all the way out to 7 p.m. Central Time or 8 p.m. East Coast Time on Friday. But that front begins to develop right here. And from this point forward, the tropical moisture from that system, it's going to take a long time to get farther to the north. But once we get into the weekend and into early next week, this is how it all evolves. So while we're waiting on all of this, our winds are going to be relatively benign and calm. Going through Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of this week, we aren't expected to have strong winds. Just notice that. This will be a week where application can get done because of the weaker winds overall. But then look, as the change comes, there's the system. And we go out here to Friday, into Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. And now we start to see the movement of that front over into our area. So by it's really Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of next week, we're going to start to increase the activity both in winds, a change in our pressure, and also we're going to be seeing better chances for precipitation. And that's seen right here. So this would now be day 5, which means Friday through day 10 or midweek next week. And now we start to put the pieces together. A low cuts up into Canada, leaves a front stranded here. The tropical moisture begins to push into that, and that then increases our chances of rainfall over in the Carolinas. So we do get a week where we get a good chance to dry out, but then we get into next week, really this weekend into next week, and our precipitation chances increase. Let me show you the timing on that. We're going to go here. Let's blow this up a little bit. This is the European model. Now, I want to show you the whole U.S., not just the Carolinas like I've been doing, so you can see this all evolve. So getting through Monday, there's our scattered storms tonight, okay? Beyond that, as you notice, high pressure tries to build in over the Great Lakes. The convection's confined to the coast, so storms there, and we're relatively dry. Now here we are getting out toward Friday. Now watch. There's a low going here through parts of Ontario out of Quebec, and the frontal boundary is here. The tropical system is there. It doesn't look to be strong, but there's a lot of moisture with it. And then what happens is by Saturday morning, afternoon, and evening, that frontal boundary is stretched right in through there. And here comes the tropical moisture farther to the north. So it's pushing like this. Now, as we go from Saturday evening into Sunday, there it is. Now you see it coming together. Tropical moisture, frontal boundary. Now we start to see our chances of rain increase as a low rides that frontal boundary early next week and pushes in here like this. Now, I just went out pretty far in an operational forecast run, all the way out to next Tuesday. But what we can do is we can just take a look to see if the upper level flow of the atmosphere and then the week 2 anomalies agree with that. I'm going to show you the European model. So there's the ridge that's backed up to the west. In fact, do you see this? Let's try that again. High over low. So the flow is doing that. Flow comes across the United States here. There's a ridge off of the east coast, and therefore the tropical system combined with this flow comes right over the top of us. And that's why the week 2 precipitation pattern, so literally starting next Monday through the following Monday, it gets us all to June 28th, this whole area, let's try that again, has a chance of being wetter than average. And that's critical to so much of what's going on, not only in our corn and soybean market, but cotton, and all the other crops that we grow here in the Carolinas. Where we expect flooding? Here. Those saturated fields in the Carolina, if we don't dry them out enough this week, we could have increased risk of flooding as well. But there's a pretty solid model consensus suggesting that this is what the week 2 pattern is going to look like. From here, let's talk about temperatures. Now today, all the extremes in temperatures are here and then everywhere to the west of that line. Let me show you these high temperatures. Here's today's highest temperatures. We're having very close to normal, upper 80s, lower 90s, okay? But out in the west, triple-digit heat. And as we play this forward into Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday, I mean, we're going to be seeing temperatures that are going to cool down a bit. We're talking about highs in the low 80s. Extremely hot in the Central Plains. And look at the temperatures going up the Central Valley of California. 105 to 110 degrees. Extremely warm there as that ridge moves over the west. By Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, what do you notice? We do not have a week of extremely high temperatures. High evaporation rates running through the plains, extremely high in the west, and that's going to stress the crops there. But if you look out beyond that, let's shrink this up so we can see the whole map. There we go. This would now be out there to day 5 through 10. Now at that particular time, the boundary is going to sit here. So we could see slightly warmer than normal conditions. But remember, we're watching that moisture come in. So when the clouds increase, those temperatures won't be too hot. All the heat is west where the flow becomes blocked. Okay, longer term. This is the new outlook for June 21st through July 21st. And we've consistently seen the models keeping this area with above average precipitation. Now there's two parts to this. One is the fact that the models as you get out there into week 2 are seeming to stay persistent through weeks 3 and 4. And that's what we've got going on here. Secondly, we still keep the high off of the coast. And I want to show you one other factor. If we look at our latest ocean temperatures, in fact, let's go bring that up really quickly here. Our latest ocean temperatures. What you can see here is that we're still cool off the coast. Now, whenever we see cool water here, if it ends up extending across a broad area like this, so just imagine all of this was cold, that's actually called the negative phase of the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, okay, PDO. Now, we're back on our map here, and right now we're trying for that. But as we look out and try to assess where this is all heading, the warmer water that's in here combined with the cooler water on the coast and what could be some cooler water emerging here very soon is important to understanding where this is going to go. You see, that Pacific Decadal Oscillation is something we monitor. We put it on an index, and I want to show you what it's done. Since about 2005 all the way to about 2013, it was very negative. Then from 2014, 15, 16, and 17, it was up here, well above average. It has since dropped back down. And the values are now sitting way down here, and that's relatively low compared to where they've been over the last about 7 or 8 years. And the reason why we concern ourselves with this, we're just kind of adding on to the narrative from a week ago about the long-range forecast, is because historically, let's blow this up here, this is what the precipitation pattern looks like. So July to August precipitation pattern for the PDO, the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. Now, we read this again by remembering that we have a negative PDO right now, which means we have cooler water off the west coast and warm water in the central Pacific. Now, if the PDO were positive, we would be more concerned about drought development here. Why? Because it is negatively correlated with rainfall. But you need to flip your thinking on this. The blue colors, because the PDO is negative, would represent wetter conditions moving forward. The drier conditions would be of greater risk here to here and also along the west coast. And that seems to keep lining up with some of our longer term forecasts. Do you notice that? I think this is just another piece to the puzzle. So despite some of the changes happening, for example, in the Corn Belt over the next week, the longer term risk as we go into July and August is for drought development. It's not a slam dunk, but it's what I think we need to be watching. But we over here on the East Coast, it appears as though we're looking at an active hurricane season, and we're also looking at a lot of moisture coming around that Bermuda high. But I'll keep watching it. I'll report back to you again next Monday. Until then, have a good week. Thanks.